gratification, we may wonder whether persistent effort is still worthwhile. Today we will examine 3 inspired proverbs and related scriptures that show why diligent labor is both wise and deeply satisfying. Let each step stir our heart, strengthen our resolve, and move us to honor Jehovah through honest toil. Proverbs 12:11. The one who cultivates his land will be satisfied with food, but the one pursuing worthless things lacks sense. Picture a farmer rising before dawn, turning the soil, planting seed, and trusting the process Jehovah designed. Every furrow dug, every seed watered is an act of faith that leads to a harvest and a table filled with food. The proverb assures us that when we cultivate what Jehovah has placed in our care, our job, our skills, our responsibilities, we will be satisfied. By contrast, chasing get-rich-quick schemes or wasting hours on empty pursuits leaves the heart hollow and the pantry bare. Ask yourself, am I treating my daily tasks as sacred stewardship, or am I distracted by worthless things? Proverbs 12:24. The hand of the diligent ones will rule, but idle hands will be put to forced labor. Diligence grants a person a measure of control and freedom. Laziness hands that control to others. Some of Jehovah's servants live where jobs are scarce and wages are low. Even so, they resist dishonest shortcuts and work hard, thereby reflecting God's qualities of honesty and reliability. When we labor conscientiously, arriving on time, giving full effort, refusing corruption, we gain the trust of employers and co-workers. Ultimately, diligent hands rule because integrity attracts opportunities, whereas idle hands end up serving the demands of circumstance. Pause and ponder. What habits can I adopt today that will make diligence my signature? Proverbs 12:14. From the fruitage of his speech a man is satisfied with good, and the work of his hands will reward him. Words flavored with wisdom bring inner satisfaction, but they must harmonize with deeds. When our talk about hard work is matched by genuine effort, Jehovah ensures a wholesome reward. Think of the pleasure that comes from finishing a project, solving a problem for a customer, or mastering a new skill. That contentment is not fleeting. It is a foretaste of the joy Jehovah feels when he surveys his own workmanship. So ask, do I pause to acknowledge Jehovah's blessing when I complete a task well? 1 Timothy 5:8 reminds family heads, certainly if anyone does not provide for those who are his own, he has disowned the faith. When a parent rises early, commutes, and works long hours to furnish food, clothing, and shelter, the family feels secure and loved. More than that, children absorb an ethic of responsibility. They learn that integrity and effort walk hand in hand. One young man named Shane reflects, "My father, a carpenter, showed me the value of building things that benefit others." Your steady labor today may be chiseling lessons of faithfulness into the hearts of those you love. Ephesians 4:28. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him do hard work, so that he may have something to share with someone in need. Hard work positions us to give, not merely to get. When disaster strikes a neighbor, or when a fellow believer faces hardship, our savings, skills, and energy become a channel of Jehovah's mercy. Jesus himself affirmed, "There is more happiness in giving than there is in receiving." Acts 20:35. Every hour we invest at our job can become a gift wrapped in compassion for the weak. Reflect, how can I earmark a portion of my income or time each month for generous acts? Hard work is rewarding because it aligns us with Jehovah's design, teaches us diligence, and opens the door to generosity. By cultivating our land, ruling with diligent hands, and enjoying the reward of honest effort, we taste a satisfaction deeper than any paycheck. May we leave here determined to work with purpose, honor our God through integrity, and experience the surpassing joy that comes from giving to others. Whatever you are doing, work at it whole-souled as for Jehovah and not for men. Let this verse echo in our minds each dawn, guiding our hands and gladden to build resilience to face adversity. The principle in Proverbs 12:16 promotes emotional self-control. By pausing before reacting to irritations, we learn to sift minor slights from serious issues. That pause protects our mental reserve tank so we have strength left for genuine hardships instead of spending it on every passing annoyance. Consistently overlooking petty insults also rewires our thinking. We become less governed by others' moods and more guided by clear values and purpose. Over time, this habit builds resilience, the capacity to stay calm, think rationally, and keep moving forward when real adversity strikes. Next question. What spiritual gems from this week's Bible reading would you like to share? Proverbs 12:1. Loving discipline shows that we want Jehovah's knowledge, whereas rejecting reproof signals a closed mind. When we welcome counsel from elders or fellow publishers, we experience the same fatherly care that God extends to all his children, and our ministry becomes more effective because we keep adjusting our methods to match scriptural guidance. Proverbs 12:2. A good person obtains Jehovah's approval. That statement reminds us that God is actively observing motives, not simply counting hours or words. By examining why we preach, out of love for God and neighbor rather than the desire for praise, we keep our service clean and invite divine favor in every aspect of life. Proverbs 12:5. The thoughts of the righteous are just, so they reflect Jehovah's own sense of fairness. Planning our conversations in prayer and basing them firmly on the Bible protects listeners from deception and keeps our conscience clear, whether we speak from a platform or at a doorstep. Proverbs 12:6. Wicked speech can be a deadly ambush, but the mouth of the upright saves. Each time we choose compassionate, hope-filled words, especially when someone is discouraged, we echo Jehovah's saving purpose and help rescue hearts weighed down by fear or guilt. Proverbs 12:10. The righteous one cares for his domestic animals, mirroring the tenderness Jehovah shows toward all living creatures. Treating pets, livestock, and the environment with respect strengthens our credibility when we proclaim that God is love, because our conduct harmonizes with our message. Proverbs 12:18. Thoughtless speech wounds like a sword, whereas the tongue of the wise heals. Pausing before answering, lowering the volume of our voice, and choosing scriptures that soothe grief or anxiety allow us to imitate Jehovah's healing manner during shepherding visits or informal witnessing. Proverbs 12:22. Jehovah detests lying lips, but delights in those who act faithfully. Absolute honesty, whether in time reports, business dealings, or family matters, guards our conscience and makes our public witness trustworthy, showing that we serve the God of truth. Proverbs 12:24. The hand of the diligent ones will rule. Industrious Christians gain responsibility because Jehovah can rely on them. By volunteering for congregation tasks and maintaining a steady study and preaching schedule, we demonstrate zeal that God may bless with further privileges of service. Proverbs 12:25. Anxiety weighs the heart down, but a good word cheers it up. Keeping encouraging verses ready, such as Matthew 6:34 or Philippians 4:6-7, and sending brief messages of support to those who struggle allows Jehovah to use our voice as a channel of refreshment. Proverbs 12:28. The path of righteousness leads to life. Along its pathway there is no death. Regular personal study, meeting attendance, and consistent field service keep us on that life-giving route. Each invitation we extend to neighbors to join us points them toward the same of his concerns. Paul is about to embark on an exceptionally long and dangerous sea journey, roughly 2,000 miles, over 3,000 kilometers from Caesarea to Rome, this time not as a free missionary but as a Roman prisoner under guard. Unlike his earlier preaching tours, he will have no control over the route, the season, or the vessel, and he will be subject to the hardships of first-century maritime travel for weeks or even months. Naturally, several serious concerns press on his mind. First, Paul already knows the Mediterranean's perils firsthand. He has survived 3 shipwrecks and has spent a night and a day in the open sea, so the prospect of more storms, wreckage, or prolonged exposure is sobering. Second, he realizes that this voyage ends in a Roman courtroom. Standing before Caesar, the highest secular authority in Satan's world at that time, could mean condemnation and death. Thus, Paul must contend not only with the physical dangers en route, but also with the uncertainty of his legal fate once he finally reaches Rome. 3. What was Paul's determination, and what will we discuss in this chapter? Knowing Jehovah wanted him to witness even before secular rulers, Paul refused to let anxiety over unknown troubles rob him of the joy of his ministry. Instead, he resolved to use every circumstance, pleasant or difficult, to fulfill his commission. The chapter traces his historic sea journey so that we can draw strength and guidance from the way he faced adversity. 4. On what kind of vessel did Paul begin his voyage, and who were his companions? Julius the centurion placed Paul and the other detainees on a cargo vessel that regularly stopped at ports along the northern coast of the Mediterranean. Although such ships offered little comfort, especially for prisoners, Paul was not alone among strangers. Aristarchus and Luke traveled with him, likely paying their own passage or acting as his attendants, ensuring spiritual and practical support during the long journey. 5. What fellowship was Paul able to enjoy at Sidon, and what may we learn from this? Although he was technically a prisoner, Paul's Roman citizenship and blameless record moved the centurion Julius to treat him with respect and grant a brief shore leave. Paul used that window not for personal comfort alone, but to seek out the congregation in Sidon. The brothers and sisters likely nourished him with food, conversation, and heartfelt prayer, easing the strains of his long confinement and upcoming voyage. Their example shows that even a short visit or simple meal can fortify someone facing trials. Likewise, today, we can strengthen traveling publishers, pioneers, or anyone who is enduring pressure by inviting them into our homes, sharing encouraging thoughts, and allowing their faith to encourage us in return. 6 to 8. How did Paul's journey progress from Sidon to Cnidus, and what preaching opportunities did he likely seize? Luke's terse note that the winds were against us signals repeated tacking and laborious coastal sailing, which lengthened the voyage and created unplanned pauses. Changing to an Alexandrian wheat carrier at Myra expanded Paul's congregation on deck. Such ships were the Mediterranean's giants, and Luke later records 276 people aboard. Every lull, whether on deck during reefing of sails, in the cramped quarters below, or while cargo was shifted at harbors, gave Paul fresh ears for the kingdom message. His example encourages us to view travel delays, service assignments with new partners, or even crowded waiting rooms as openings to speak a helpful word about God's purpose rather than as inconveniences to endure. Now, let's analyze the box. Sea travel and trade routes. Question 1. Why did ancient passengers have to negotiate passage and bring their own supplies when traveling by sea? Answer. Merchant ships were built for cargo, not for people, so captains offered only spare deck space. Travelers had to haggle for a spot, supply their own food, bedding, and shelter, and sleep in makeshift tents that they set up each night. Question 2. How did seasonal weather patterns affect the timing and length of Mediterranean voyages? Answer. Because sailing speed and route depended completely on favorable winds, most traffic ceased from mid-November to mid-March. Even in good seasons, unpredictable wind shifts could greatly prolong a trip. Now let's analyze the box. The contrary winds of the Mediterranean. Question 1. Why could sailing westward across the Mediterranean become nearly impossible during winter, even though eastward travel was relatively easy in midsummer? Answer. In midsummer, prevailing winds blow west to east, favoring eastbound ships, but in winter, unstable weather fronts push powerful cyclones eastward, unleashing gale-force winds, torrential rain, and even snow, making westbound navigation hazardous or virtually impossible. Question 2. How did captains try to mitigate contrary winds, and what does Luke's account of Paul's grain ship illustrate about those efforts? Answer. Masters often hugged the coastline, used land breezes, or slipped into protected channels, such as the one between Cyprus and Asia Minor, to lessen wind resistance. Paul's grain ship followed that strategy, but, once beyond shelter, seasonal winds still overpowered the vessel, forcing course changes and showing that even prudent routing could not guarantee a smooth voyage.